And I wasn't actually a gamer personally, but I was always like the entrepreneurial type, identified an opportunity in the market and started a business around it. So this kind of came to us. Me and my kind of childhood best friend had this idea to start this business, and we said we should do that. And then the next day we just kind of started.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the new episode of Ecom 365. I'm the co-founder and CEO of ShopAgain.io. For this episode, I have a new guest with me, Michael. He started as an online retailer when he was still in college back in 2000. He grew it to tens of millions of dollars in sales before having a successful exit. And the rest, we should hear directly from Michael. Thanks for joining us, Michael. How are you doing today?
Great, Maruthi. Thanks for inviting me. Good to be with you.
Absolutely. I was looking forward to having you on the show and sharing your journey with you. And it's very interesting. You started back in 2000, and e-commerce was not the most popular name then. How did you started e-commerce store in 2000 while in the college?
Yeah. So I don't know, your listeners probably won't even know about half of the tools and platforms we used at the time, because I don't even know if they exist anymore. This was like the old days. So started my first e-commerce retailer in my college dorm room back in 2000. It was we were selling mainly computer accessories, so keyboards and headsets and mice, mostly for gamers. And I wasn't actually a gamer personally, but I was always like the entrepreneurial type, identified an opportunity in the market and started a business around it. So this kind of came to us. Me and my kind of childhood best friend had this idea to start this business, and we said we should do that. And then the next day we just kind of started, and we built the website. I think the first one was on a platform called Miva Merchant, which again, I don't know if anyone has ever heard of. This was obviously way before Shopify. This was before things like Google AdWords and Facebook, of course, and all these other tools for customer acquisition too. So the way we built the business, and we actually grew the business from zero with no capital, to $1 million in our first year, and then went to grow it to tens of millions in sales before exiting. But we did what would now be called influencer marketing. And that wasn't a term at the time either, but it was, folks that had niche websites that they set up, because at the time you were passionate about a particular video game. It wasn't called a blog at the time, but you would just create a website to talk about that video game, or maybe you'd have a forum related to that video game. And we partnered with a lot of these sites to advertise and promote our products, and that helped us kind of grow pretty quickly. And ultimately then came along Google AdWords, although the predecessor to that was a product called GoTo at the time, which was the first pay-per-click search engine kind of tool. And then Google AdWords came along and just completely eviscerated them and made them irrelevant. And then ultimately, Facebook and changed platforms to something a little more modern. But we exited in 2013 before there was Shopify or a lot of the tools that exist today for e-commerce and direct-to-consumer brands.
Wow, that's an amazing story, and my head is like full of questions. But so tell me one thing on top of my head: how did you realize that I want to go this route of influencer marketing while it was still not a word?
Sure, we just kind of stumbled on it. So I actually remember the moment that we had this realization. It was we were limping along, right? We were trying to hustle our way to get sales, and maybe we were getting 5 orders a day or something like at that point, a few months in. And then we woke up one day, myself and my co-founder, and we had like 30 orders. And we're like, what's going on? We're like, we're rich, at that point, we're wondering what's going on, what we're blowing up or something. And we tracked it down to a website that was focused on flight simulation. It was a very popular game. And actually that still exists. Microsoft Flight Simulator is still a popular game. And we were mentioned in the forum by a user who said, I used this product and it worked great. It made it more realistic for me. And so we tracked that down and we're like, this is it. This is how we do it. We partner with these niche websites who have these passionate communities around particular video games or particular use cases, and partner with them to help them promote our brand and give us credibility and get us awareness in their communities. And we just kind of strategically went one by one across a variety of these vertical niches and continued to grow and scale.
Wow. I mean, I would say the rules of the games haven't really changed much. Even now in the influencer marketing, the biggest challenge is discovering and finding out the right people you want to work with. And that was the same for you too.
Right. Yes. I think it's interesting how it's almost come full circle. People were very dependent on acquisition channels, third-party channels like Google and Facebook and now TikTok and other channels, but how influencer marketing has made such a comeback, or I wouldn't say it ever really went away, but it continues to become more and more popular and more important as people look for authenticity and low cost channels to drive awareness and acquisition among communities that are passionate about whatever it is they're doing.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right on that, Michael. I'm seeing entrepreneurs from each decade who have used this route of influencer marketing while it was still not a thing. I mean, they reached out to their local community, popular people, or the one who were organizing some events locally. But this has always been there. Actually, it just got more popular, more tools, more structure around it. But it has always been there.
Yeah, now they gave it an official name, and then they added the UGC component to it, and that became such a critical element to influencer marketing. And so it's just only grown, and I think it's going to continue to grow. And you've got all this digital noise. How do you raise awareness in a way that maintains a level of authenticity and credibility and speaks to a particular type of target customer?
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So tell me more about your travel in general. So you started with this e-commerce store, had a good exit, and roughly in how many years you think you sold the business?
So we sold it in 2013, which was actually a lot longer than I would have ever imagined holding or being involved in that particular business. We went through the recession in 2008. We were looking at exiting around that time, and then obviously the world changed a lot during that period, and we kind of recognized that realistically we were going to need to ride this out until things came, the macro environment improved again, and where there was an appetite for acquisition again. And we rode that out for a few years. Was able to continue to maintain a profitable and growing business in that time, and so ultimately exited in 2013. And that's when I got into more of a private equity operating role. So myself and business partner, Drew, he had a similar history. He had started a retailer around the same time as me, 2000, exited around the same time. And we met and were both and kind of started working together on this private equity operating capacity, where a lot of private equity funds hold a bunch of e-commerce and direct-to-consumer brands within their portfolios, and they want to bring in, we were kind of their operational bench. And so they would call us in, whether it was due diligence on a potential deal, or they wanted to evaluate the opportunities that existed with one of their properties, or just provide a second set of eyes or additional perspective. Like, is the team doing everything that they should be? Are there opportunities in the business that we're missing? And in some cases, where they lacked the in-house expertise or skill set, they would actually ask us to come in and go hands-on in certain areas, from email and lifecycle marketing to pay-per-click and media buying, and just help the business set up a stronger program, a better foundation, help them grow, and then potentially bring in, internal folks that could continue to run with it after that.
Yeah, and that aligns very well with your experience too. And after growing your own brand for a decade, you obviously knew how to go about those things. So, I mean, this is still quite a change in the role, because caring for your business is very different from caring for a portfolio of businesses. How was the experience for you? Because I mean, sometimes you might have to butt head with the founder too.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think that was always a challenge. And a lot of the cases that we were in, a lot of the instances where we were pulled in, they were more commonly turnarounds or businesses that were not in the best shape, because either that was the nature of the fund that was acquiring them, or if everything was running 100% smooth and they were throwing off cash left and right, less likely that the fund would ask for another opinion on what was going on in the business. So one, juggling a bunch of businesses wasn't super easy, because you have to kind of compartmentalize each one. And two, to your point, a lot of times you're walking into legacy processes, legacy people, not the greatest people in certain roles in some cases. And so it was challenging to not, in some cases, we always had the backing and support of the fund, which goes a long way in making sure things happen. But at the same time, it's not always the easiest thing, where you don't have direct control over the organization, and you can't, just because you make a recommendation doesn't mean it's going to be followed, or doesn't mean it's going to be followed in the time frame that you would expect. And so that was a challenge. But I think in 2018, we were pulled in to evaluate a deal for a 9-figure aftermarket automotive retailer, and ultimately went on to acquire that company as a carve out from AutoZone. And that was also a turnaround. And we were asked to come in and help on the diligence side. It became very quick, rapidly apparent that it needed a leadership and management change. So myself and my partner were asked to come in and actually lead the company as CEO and CMO. I was CMO, he was CEO. And so that was interesting, because while it was a portfolio company, we actually were pulling the strings. We had direct management control over that organization. And originally we thought it was going to be an interim step where we were going to be the interim management team. We would kind of stabilize the ship. We would recruit a new management team, and then we would fade out. But we actually, to your point, recognized that we enjoyed and valued being in a role where we actually could make calls and implement them, and had more direct control over the organization. So we ended up turning that into a more permanent role, and did that for about 3 years.
Wow. And I can totally see your point, because I mean, once you have been in those shoes, doing everything yourself, it's hard to let that go.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it was nice in a sense that you didn't quite have the same level of stress as being the CEO, but I think we went through kind of phases, and that phase kind of passed where we were ready to get more hands-on and actually go deep on one company again, versus spreading ourselves among a bunch of different companies. Focus on one, have more direct control over it. It was a nice transition back, kind of in the other direction, versus doing the consulting. Yeah,
that totally makes sense. What you just said brings one question to my mind, Michael. So it sounds like that the firm that you were working with, their role was to identify these businesses, e-commerce businesses, which have potential, and they think their expertise can fill that gap and grow those brands and make them even bigger than what they're. That's what it sounds like. So while you are seeing all of these businesses and helping them evaluate these, what was the most common mistakes you observed these brands making, which had potential?
Sure, it's a great question. I think in a lot of there's a few that I can point to. I'll start with one, culture. And that probably isn't the most common thing that someone would lead with. You might think it's operational efficiency, high fixed or variable costs, or they don't understand marketing. And those things definitely existed at AutoAnything, the automotive company, and at almost every organization that we saw. But what I think really is the foundation before you can fix any of those other things is truly fixing the culture. And that became really apparent to us when we stepped into that role, where it was just that particular entity was part of a very large kind of corporate parent. There was a lot of bureaucracy. There was a lot of, there was a lot of bloat, redundancy, and a lot of folks that were not empowered to really perform the jobs that they were hired to do. And so we really had to bring back a culture of entrepreneurialism, a culture of execution, a culture of transparency and empowerment. And that was the foundation that had to be set. And that took us close to a year. We ended up changing out almost the entire senior management team, which wasn't what we had intended from the day we stepped in. That was just a result of recognizing that certain people were on board with a certain type of culture that we wanted to create, and certain people were not. So from senior management team down to particular folks within the organization that felt, a level of comfort in the way that things had been structured before and didn't really buy into what we were trying to do. You kind of have to help them move to something, somewhere else that they're more comfortable, and bring in the right people that are on board with your culture and your vision. And we saw that at a lot of organizations, just where a culture of just bureaucracy, a culture of really top-down management of, this person has all the answers and he's going to micromanage every person and tell them exactly what they should be doing and exactly how to do it. That just slowed things down tremendously at a lot of organizations we saw. We also saw a lot of legacy infrastructure issues that existed at the automotive company and a lot of other companies we saw. And they just had not nurtured or invested in the systems and the technology that they need to remain current and efficient and relevant. A lot of these companies were big companies. They were born, 20 plus years ago and working on the same stack that they had built from the beginning. And meanwhile, you've got all these new startups that are coming in and they're launching Shopify stores, right? And they've got a part-time developer managing $50 million of GMV, where a company that predated Shopify, in the case of AutoAnything, for example, had 50 full-time developers at one point managing, a couple $100 million in GMV. It was completely out of whack, and you cannot, so you've got to address that quickly and aggressively, because you're just not going to be able to be competitive when you've got a bunch of folks utilizing new technology and tools and point solutions that allow you to be far more efficient at a far lower cost. And then it was really fixing the marketing program. So again, a lot of these companies, direct to consumer either wasn't in their DNA, they were part of a larger organization that wasn't solely focused on direct to consumer, and so that wasn't their mindset or their DNA, or they just had folks that had been around and not really evolved their thinking over time and not really implemented what became current best practices. And those were actually some of the easier fixes. Like we can recognize that very quickly, and we can make some very quick changes to implement more marketing best practices and improve efficiency of the marketing program.
Yeah. I've been in the industry for over a decade, Michael, and I think I 100% agree with what you said. fixing culture in a company is by far the hardest problem, and most companies are just not able to do it. It's super hard. It's like changing the DNA. Changing tools is easy. I mean, it's not easy, but you can do it. It doesn't take that
Yep.
awful lot of time. But changing DNA of how a company runs, how people interact with each other, and what they seem important and what not, so that's a different game altogether.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right.
Yeah. So that gives you a pretty good idea of your overall experience and how you were involved in e-commerce. So more recently, you've been more involved in the direct mail marketing as well, and that's very interesting. I want to hear something more about that. So how
Sure.
did you stumble upon that, and why it looked like a great idea to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So interestingly, I've been, as I kind of mentioned, I've been in digital marketing and direct performance and performance marketing for over 20 years. Certainly advocate for it, believe in it, and it's a critical component to any e-commerce retailer today. What was also interesting was over the years, we had also utilized direct mail marketing to grow both customer acquisition, but also a lot of customer retention. We recognize that digital channels continue to get more and more saturated. I think the aha moment for us was we were really big proponents of lifecycle marketing. Lifecycle marketing means like automation based on user behavior. We know that a customer made a purchase, has not made a purchase within another purchase within 60 days. We should hit them with an automated campaign that says, come back, it's time for a refill, or check out our new item, and here's an incentive to do it. We'd built all these amazing flows and automations in email, and they were really targeted. The creative was great. And then we'd look at the open rates, and they would be 20, 25%. And that's pretty typical or average for an e-commerce store. And we're like, yeah, we just spent all this effort targeting this really relevant audience. We built all the campaigns and creative, and we're missing 3/4 of the audience. They're not even seeing the message that we're sending. How do we get more people to see this? Because we know the response rates are good if we do. And so we had used direct mail successfully to help fill that gap, but nobody was making it as easy as email. And so it was clunky. It was exporting a bunch of spreadsheets and then finding a mail house and then sending them spreadsheets to batch and blast a campaign to a bunch of people, and then do a bunch more spreadsheets to try and match back and figure out what the ROI was on that campaign. It wasn't automated. It was difficult and clunky and not very trackable. And we said, we need to make this as easy as email. So we actually, with intent, set out to identify companies that were in this space and doing interesting things. And myself and my business partner found one about 4 years ago. It was kind of in its infancy at the time, but it was really shared that vision for how we thought direct mail could be applicable and relevant to e-commerce and direct-to-consumer brands. So we acquired that company, and the founder still remains on board today as CTO. And we were helping grow that business, and it was getting traction. But we were still, it wasn't our full-time attention because we were still working kind of with the automotive company. But we were helping give it marketing support. We were helping build up the team. And it was growing nicely. And then, about a little over a year ago, particularly as you saw the iOS update come out and just kind of cripple people's Facebook ad performance, it just created this increased appetite to diversify your channels and not become reliant on one particular channel, and look for channels that were a way to reach your customers in an effective, cost-effective, trackable way that you couldn't, you were struggling to do with Facebook and other digital channels. At the same time, email engagement continued to decline. You see it every year. Open rates continue to decline because people are just bombarded by email. And so we really got a bit of a tailwind from that, where the interest and appetite in this channel really increased significantly. And this coincided nicely with driving the automotive company to an exit, which we did last year. And so we've really been all in on this over the last year, and it's just been growing like a rocket ship. It's been really fun, and direct to consumer and e-commerce brands are really understanding the value of doing this and seeing the returns that are just extraordinary relative to what they think, what they might have thought, and relative to even other channels. So essentially Postpilot, that's the company, is Klaviyo for postcards. And so many e-commerce brands are on Klaviyo for their ESP. It kind of instantly clicks for them when we say Klaviyo for postcards, because you're sending these segmented campaigns, but you're also sending automated flows, just like an email flow, that are individually personalized, triggered, and then tracked, because we integrate with Shopify and we know if that customer goes on to make a subsequent purchase or uses a coupon code on the card. So you see ROI in real time on your dashboard. You set up these flows just like you would an email flow, and you're just continuing to see great engagement and amazing ROI on those campaigns.
Thanks for sharing. That was very insightful, Michael. Also, what you said is pretty relevant to what I'm also seeing in the industry, that more and more businesses, especially in last year and a half, are looking to diversify, be on more channels, and not be tied to just one platform or one channel. That's what pandemic and iOS update has taught them to.
Yeah, absolutely. We work with thousands of direct to consumer brands. Probably one of the most common use cases or starting points for it would be like a win back campaign. So you've got a brand like Obvi. They're a really popular supplements brand. In their first 3 years of business, they did 30 million in sales, but they were looking for a way to re-engage these customers that hadn't bought. Like, they sell a 30 to 60 day supply. If a customer is going 60 to 90 days without making another purchase, something is wrong, and they're already being hit by their email and retargeting ads if they're opening or engaging with them. So they're not converting off of those. So they were looking for another way to reach those customers and get them back on track before they lost them for good. Because with so many brands today, lifetime value is critical, because customer acquisition costs are rising so rapidly. And the more time that goes by without that customer coming back, the less likely they are to ever come back. And so if you don't get them back on track fairly soon, then you risk losing them for good. And so they were looking for ways to ensure that that doesn't happen. And they ran a postcard campaign that targeted people after 90 days. If they didn't make that expected purchase again, trigger a card to go out with an incentive. I think they're up to like a 28x ROAS on that campaign.
Wow, that's amazing. Nice. It was a pleasure to have you, Michael, in the episode. Thanks for sharing your experience and all the knowledge of 2 decades of being in the e-commerce industry. This episode was sponsored by ShopAgain.io, an AI-powered customer retention platform. Thank you.